I'm John Lame, and welcome to Untapped. We're here to help you create financial success by discovering the wealth within. Hey, it's John. Thanks for joining me today. And I don't know if everyone's been following us closely, but it's been just unbelievable few weeks. And if you said why, we have so many things going on. We started down this path of creating a platform company really about 18 months ago. And over the last few months, we've really been putting the major building blocks of the platform company in place. So at this point, we have our regular Facebook live calls. We're doing those weekly. We've got the podcast, which is what you're listening to today. We've put the e-learning course out there, and we also now have launched the membership site. And so the next step, major step that'll be coming up in the next few months is we're going to get out there with a book. But at the end of the day, you're watching all these different pieces come together. And we think the timing for what we're doing is really, really good because at the end of the day, we are in an economy that's going to change. It's going to change faster than it did a year ago or 2 years ago. I know that's hard for many people to believe as we're in this COVID environment. But the reality is, even though COVID's what we're talking a lot about today, the underlying need for transformational change is great, and we're going to see more and more of that show up in the economy. And if you said, John, how do you know that? Well, for someone that's been in the financial industry as long as I have, you can kind of read the macro picture and see, even as people try to kick the can down the road, that you reach a point where you just can't kick the can down the road that much longer. And what we're seeing in terms of macro trends is the long-term debt cycle is peaked out, the short-term debt cycle is peaked out. We've reached a point where China and the U.S. are pulling apart instead of working together to create a global economy. And we're also seeing a lot of top-line revenue growth flatten out for so many companies. And then the other thing is when we look in many parts of the United States, we're seeing an environment where per capita income is totally flat. It hasn't gone up in many places for over 25 years. And those are just really strong indications that there's a need for change. So if we're going to fix this huge divide between the haves and have-nots in our country, we're going to have to come up with brand new business models for people to step into and add value. Because we can say we want to go fix the problem, but at the end of the day, it's not a pay problem, it's a create value problem. When we go in and look at many, many employees today, they're disengaged, they're not adding a lot of value, and importantly, people are not investing in themselves, and this is what's really scary, we're watching the school system that's looking backwards, not create value. And then we're also seeing an issue where companies, rather than aggressively investing in their people and giving them new skills and knowledge and experience, they're essentially saying, we're going to put that money into technology. We'll put it into software. We'll put it into hardware. We'll put it into robotics. We'll put it into AI. And what we're finding is we are not investing in people, and that has to change. And so what we're all about at Untapped is, well, how do you figure out how you individually double your income? And you pick the time frame. I don't care whether it's 3 years, it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. The bottom line is we teach you how to set financial goals to increase your income. And as we do that, we then lay out what would your better world look like in 3 years, and what would the growth plan be to help you get there, And very importantly, we also add in the financial planning component. So what would the financial plan look like that will allow you to basically implement your growth plan and double your income? So one of the primary ways that you can do this is through what we call multiple income streams. And I just want to talk about that for a while today, because there's an incredible array of approaches to get at multiple income streams. So let's just start with, we do this assessment. And again, our two go-tos are, we love Colby because it gets at the design you have from birth. And then we also go in and look at strength finders, but we have other approaches that we can use, but those are our two biggies. And when we get finished looking at the results, we really start to narrow down, hey, what is it that you're just good at? You know, we call them gifts, but what are you just good at? And what do you love to do? And how can we rethink that? Whether it's with your primary job and your current employer, where we sit down with a boss or a boss's boss or a combination of both and say, hey, here's where I am really, really good, and I'm only using this part of the time. And so it's like, well, how can we expand the length of time that you're really in this gift zone or what you're really good at? And in many cases, what this does is it creates an opportunity for you to partner with your employer and start to add, how do I add much more value to you over the next few years so that I can double my income? And if the reality is I can't double my income here, no problem. You know, this shouldn't be a threat for either you or for me, but let's talk through it. And so one of the other things that can show up is perhaps a side business where you can do some things on your own. And so, you know, if we're going into Christmas or your birthday, it could be that, you know, what you need to be asking for is a tool set, or it's like, I really want to go take this one course, or I want to go get this one certification. So again, it's back to your growth plan of what skills, what knowledge, what experience, what relationships, and importantly, what attitude and habits really, really come in and make you the best version of you where we know you're good. And then the other thing that you can do is you can do freelance work, you can do some temporary work, you can create an at-home online business. There's just so many ways to get at this. And the reason this is important is when we go in and we look at income and job stability, don't let you fool yourself, don't let your employer fool yourself, it's changing. And the reality is, as we enter this period of great transformational change, that stability is just not going to be there the way that it was. And so as Seth Godin says so often, don't let your comfort zone fool you into believing that your security or safe zone is the same thing. Okay, so where do we go with this? Well, the world right now is waiting to return to normal. We don't think it's coming. You know, we think COVID basically just pushed us down the road faster towards changes that needed to come. And we're going to watch companies, every smart CFO out there, you know, is going to go into the calendar year budget season and basically challenge their organization. Why do you need this headcount? You know, if you're saying it's project work and investments, is there real evidence that we're going to get a return on this in a changing environment? And if it's overhead, it's like, well, wait a minute. Is that overhead something that should be inside this company or outside this company? And so when we watch all these new business models develop, what we're going to see is people take a big inventory of what's inside, what's outside, and should more of what we do be sourced from outside? How many W-2 employees that we're paying full benefits for, and we're basically saying we have career pathing, and we're saying that we really create equity value for shareholders, is just not true. These jobs can be done outside, and remember, the best jobs inside a company are the ones that, you know, provide long-range career paths, provide for income growth, and importantly, also create equity value for the shareholder. So if they don't create equity value for the shareholder, so many of these jobs are going to go outside. And they make sense to be outside because so often if they're outside, you can tap into something that has better scale, better cost structure, creates equity value. And so these are the kinds of things that we're going to see. So overall, bold call, but we'll back it up with the help we get from Singularity University. Half the jobs in big company America, really in big institutions generally, will not be here in 10 years. So in that environment, it's like a big musical chairs game. You know, over 10 years, that's roughly 5% of the jobs going away per year. And if we basically hit a rough economy, it's more than that. And so what this does is your role could be cut. And so what we're asking you to do is to have real adult-to-adult conversations with the people in management and ask the question, how do I add more value here? And do I have the potential to double my income, especially if we go into an environment where there's more inflation? Because we know that the federal government has to create inflation. I think there's a pretty high probability we'll see some sort of currency devaluation or at least a lot of printing of money over the next 5 to 10 years. And it's like, well, how do I keep up with that as inflation starts to show up? And so the next thing we want to talk about is looking ahead. So we call it a 3-year future focus. And it's like, okay, how do you lay out where you want to go and start to share that? So we're giving you the tools that you need, not only to talk to yourself and talk to your spouse, but also to talk to your boss. But it's like, here's my 3-year future focus. Here's my ideal growth plan. And with that, we're going to talk about, well, what could you actually accomplish within your current job, with your current employer, and what has to be done outside. And then we talk about, okay, how do we get there financially? And for some of you, it may make sense to actually reach in and save, take some of the savings that you have and redeploy it differently. Or it may even make sense for you to give up that 401k with the match because the money can be spent on investing in you and getting a much greater rate of return. It's so interesting. We've been on this automatic pilot for so many years where we're just trained to think, okay, my best savings vehicle, my best investment would be my 401k, get the match, put it into the stock market. But believe me, with interest rates this low, with valuations this high, with so many big companies struggling to grow their top line revenues and hold margins, you are probably the best investment that you have, but you have to think differently. Instead of thinking, I'm just going to put it in the S&P 500 index, start asking the question, what can I do to make me worth twice as much to my current employer or out there in the marketplace? Okay. So by having these adult conversations, we can really establish what's the reality of my current situation. And then this is important because we put the SWOT together: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's so important that we have a very realistic viewpoint of what we can do from where we are today, because we have to know what we're going to change. So what you're hearing us say is really good long-term wealth creators create their own personal financial safety net. They think of themselves as their own CEO, and they're laying out their game plan, and they're doing their SWOT analysis, and they're asking the right questions. And when we go in and look at the threat side of it, you know, we're really good at saying, okay, what's going on in your industry? Is it really growing? Are all segments in your industry growing? Is your current employer positioned properly? If they need to change their position so that they can invest capital differently, what would that mean for your job? And I just want to say to you, if the CFO comes in and says, look, our goal is to take our FTE, full-time equivalents, down 5% a year, and your job does not create equity, but your next door neighbor who works for the company does, your job's going to be at risk because people are going to have to make these moves. So bottom line is you need to think of it as on my financial safety net. And you need to make sure that your balance sheet is in a position where you have an emergency cash reserve, you have credit lines, you have long-term credit in place, you even know how to think about your retirement assets so that if you need to get to more financial assets that you can do it. So bottom line, how do you get started? You figure out where you're gifted. You start to ask this question. We talk about Pareto a lot, whereas where am I getting 80% of the reward that I'm getting paid for 20% of the effort, and how do I expand that? How do I add more value by generating more income for me, but also making sure that I'm partnered with the right people and I'm adding value for them? How do I think about my balance sheet? So we go in and look at your net worth and where all the assets are bucketed. Are they invested properly to get you through what might be coming? And what are the opportunities that we should be looking at? These all work together. So bottom line is, what's the financial payoff to you? It's committing to this 10-10-10 life plan, where the first 10% is an investment in you, the most valuable asset and the longest term asset that we have. The second 10 comes back to, all right, how do I save money? And frankly, also be in a position that I can do fun things like take that family vacation, buy that wedding ring, whatever it's going to take. And then the other 10% is, how do we learn to give back to the community? And we don't care whether that's time or money, but we want to get you into this mindset that you need 30 margin points in a really successful lifelong situation, where the first 10, investment in you, second 10, savings for things that you want to do that are important to you, and the third 10 is, how do I give back, whether it's time or money. Now, just a reminder, everybody says to me, I don't talk enough about my financial planning background and my financial background. I need to quantify more. Think about this. If you're just getting an extra $500 a month, we invest that at 5% for 10 years, it ends up being almost $78,000. We get it up to $1,000 a month and we do the same thing, for 10 years, and it's $155,000. So if you need to sit down and just run numbers to get, feel good about this, this is a big deal. But think about this for a minute. If we can go in and double your income over that 3, 5, 7, 10-year period of time, and then continue to invest back in ourselves and double it again, it makes such a difference for your lifestyle, your families. I mean, the bottom line is, part of having a really good life, and again, I'm going to go back to my favorite Dan Sullivan 4 freedoms, which is freedom of money, freedom of time, freedom of relationship, freedom of purpose. But we're never going to get to a point where we have these freedom of relationship and freedom of time if we don't make enough money and buy that freedom. And so this is why we think Untapped needs to be the first and most important investment in you, because you're going to need guidance on how to get there. And at the same time, we're not going to get out of a hole and get to a point where we can afford to pay somebody else to do the lawn or to work on the car or change the oil or do other things, or even hire the babysitter so that we have more time with our spouse if we don't double our income. So hopefully today's session was fun for you. You enjoyed it. We continue to get great comments from everyone on different things that we can talk about. Please feel free to hit our website, www.livelifeuntapped.com. Join us on those Facebook Live calls. And, finally, it doesn't cost much. Just join the membership site. Become, one of us, which is a community committed to adding more value in our own lives and growing our incomes. It's a really worthy cause. It's all about you becoming the best future version of you that you can become. Hey, thanks so much for joining me today. It's always my privilege, my pleasure to spend this time with you. And if there's anything I can do to help you, please look me up. Thanks. And remember, my email address, if you want it, john@livelifeuntapped.com. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks again for joining us today. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate us, write a review, and visit us on our website, livelifeuntapped.com. Now, go live your life untapped.